Hey everyone, this is TH Stories 80 where we narrate fanfiction audiobooks. Now we begin chapter 1 of Voyager Lost. Captain's Ready Room, USS Voyager, Delta Quadrant. Captain's Log, Supplemental. Said Captain Catherine Janeway of the stranded Federation starship Voyager, leaning back in the chair behind her desk in the Ready Room. She stared at her reflection in the computer screen as it beeped, signaling it was ready to record her log. As she spoke, her mind drifted over the events of the past year. It had been a year since Voyager was pulled into the Delta Quadrant by an alien known as the Caretaker. Having destroyed the Caretaker's array to prevent it from falling into the hands of a hostile race called the Kazon, Voyager had spent every spare moment since that fateful day trying to find a way home under the command of Captain Janeway and a mixed crew of Starfleet officers and Maquis. Ironically, it was the mission to capture the Maquis, led by former Starfleet officer Chakotay, that had brought Voyager into this predicament, and it was that same man whom Janeway had appointed as her first officer. However, deep down, she secretly regretted her decision to destroy the Caretaker's array. A small part of her couldn't help but wonder, if she hadn't destroyed it, if she had simply used it to return Voyager to the Alpha Quadrant, they would already be home. They wouldn't be facing a 75-year journey back to Earth. But that was a thought she kept buried. The present was all that mattered, and all they could do now was try anything possible to shorten the return. With two new additions to the crew, Neelix, a Talaxian, and Kes and Ocampan, both natives of the Delta Quadrant, Voyager remained on course for the Alpha Quadrant. While speaking, Janeway's eyes drifted to the mug of coffee on her desk. She picked it up and took a sip, the warmth spreading through her as the computer beeped again, reminding her that the log was still active and waiting for her to continue. The captain sighed before resuming. We just dropped off Amelia Earhart and her people who, before she could finish, a violent jolt shook the entire ship. Alarms blared as the lights dimmed and red warning strips illuminated along the walls of her ready room. She pushed herself up from her chair, struggling to stay upright as another jolt threw her off balance. The next one came harder, sending her crashing to the floor. Groaning, Janeway grabbed the edge of her desk and pulled herself up just as another violent tremor rattled the ship. One of the overhead panels exploded, showering her with sparks. "Captain to the bridge!" came Chakotay's voice through her comm badge, shouting over the chaos. "I'm on my way!" she yelled back, trying to steady herself. Another tremor slammed her into the wall behind her desk. She fought to stay upright, clutching the furniture for support before making for the door. As she did, she caught sight of an encroaching purple haze outside the viewport. Her eyes widened at the sight. Slapping the door control, she dashed through as it slid open and into pure chaos on the bridge. Another jolt threw her to the floor near her chair. The situation was the same everywhere. Officers were being tossed about as the ship bucked violently, the hull groaning as if it were about to tear itself apart. Throughout the vessel, crew members were injured, some seriously. In the mess hall, Neelix screamed in pain as hot oil splashed onto his arm. Crew members helped rush him to sickbay, struggling to stay balanced themselves. Meanwhile, Kes, working in the hydroponics bay, stumbled into a shelf of plants just as another jolt hit. The shelf collapsed, burying her in soil and water. She rolled aside just in time to avoid another cascade of falling equipment, scrambling into a corner to watch helplessly as a year's worth of work lay scattered across the deck. "What's going on?" she whispered, her heart racing as a low metallic groan reverberated through the ship. Was this an attack? Back on the bridge, Janeway, still on the floor, shouted, "Report!" Chakotay, who had been thrown from his chair, scrambled to her side to help her up. Chief of Security Tuvok, Operations Officer Harry Kim, and the rest of the bridge crew struggled to keep control of the ship. "We were at Warp 6 when we hit some kind of subspace anomaly," Chakotay shouted over the din of alarms and the roar of the shaking hull. Tuvok reported that 25 crew members, including Neelix, were in sickbay, where the doctor was treating injuries. In engineering, Chief Engineer Belana Torres called in next. The warp field collapsed after entering the anomaly, Captain. "Full reverse," Janeway barked, gripping the armrests of her chair. The order was directed at helmsman Tom Paris, who was fighting to keep the ship under control. I need more power, B'Elanna, he yelled into his comm as his fingers flew across the console. I can't give you more, Torres shouted back, her voice barely audible over the roar of engineering. Smoke billowed from the base of the warp core. The core could breach if... Hold on. B'Elanna, Seska yelled from another console, pointing toward the rising smoke. A breach is forming. Torres immediately began shouting orders to contain the reaction, demanding a status update on the core stability. Meanwhile, Paris was straining to hold the ship steady, but his console readouts showed Voyager still inching forward into the anomaly. Slower now, but unstoppable. I can't hold her, Paris shouted. Forward momentum continuing, Kim yelled, his voice tight with panic as the ship groaned under the pressure. Someone cut the alarms, yelled Janeway as her body shook violently. The alarm ceased, but the terrible groaning of the ship continued. Someone tell me what's going on. We're caught in some kind of subspace anomaly. It's pulling us in, shouted Kim, trying to stay steady on his feet as the entire ship shook around him. Sensors are detecting something. It's a form of subspace radiation we haven't encountered before. On screen, ordered Janeway. The view screen flickered to life, revealing a purple haze, the same one she had seen outside her viewport, now enveloping the ship. Kim confirmed that the haze was a type of radiation from subspace, unlike anything known. Captain, said Tuvok from his station, Howl's stress is exceeding maximum tolerance. Janeway turned to look at the Vulcan, her eyes wide. Then she shifted her gaze to Chakotay, who was bleeding from his left temple. There's no other choice, she said grimly. If they continue reversing the engines, the ship might break apart. Understanding immediately, the first officer nodded. He looked out at the screen as Janeway ordered, engines forward. Paris glanced back at her, confusion on his face, just as the ship began shaking even more violently. Get us into the breach, Janeway barked. It's either that or we break apart in space. Do it, Tom. Paris turned back to his console and disengaged the reverse thrusters. The display showed Voyager moving into the anomaly. He activated the impulse engines at 1/4 power, watching the speed indicator rise as the ship slipped through the haze. Inside the anomaly, the crew found themselves surrounded by a tunnel of blue and white light. The shaking stopped, giving everyone a moment to breathe and tend to the injured. The bridge crew, however, remained tense as they stared at the screen. How's the crew? Janeway asked, turning toward Tuvok. There are 41 injuries, Tuvok reported. 11 are major but not life-threatening. That number includes Neelix. Janeway's concern deepened. How about Kes? She is in the hydroponics lab, said Tuvok. Janeway tapped her comm badge. Kes, are you alright? In the cargo hold, Kes was panting, her heart racing as she slowly stood. The plants, soil samples, nutrient water, and even insects were scattered across the floor. Her hard work, nearly a year's worth, lay ruined. Fighting back tears, she told herself she could rebuild with the doctor's help. Taking a deep breath, she turned her thoughts to the crew and stepped carefully over the debris toward the door. I'm alright, Captain, she answered through the comm badge. A bit shaken, but I'm fine. Kes, Janeway continued, while Chakotay stood and wiped the blood from his temple. He asked Kim for updates on their location as Janeway said, Neelix has been badly injured. He's in sickbay and I need you to assist the doctor. Understood, replied Kes. She pressed the panel to open the door and rushed out, passing crew members who were carrying the injured to sickbay. Meanwhile, on the bridge, the crew worked frantically to gather data on their location. In engineering, B'Elanna had shut down the warp core under Janeway's orders to allow for emergency repairs. Despite all systems operating, the sensor data made little sense. Kim stared at his console before reporting. Sensors are showing an unfamiliar type of subspace radiation, nothing else. His brow furrowed. Captain, the computer can't determine where we are or how fast we're going. Janeway and Chakotay exchanged a silent look, both wondering what new mystery they had stumbled into. Suddenly, the ship shook again, and then, with a blinding flash, burst out of the blue and white tunnel back into real space. Full stop, commanded Janeway. The ship slowed, then came to a halt. Are sensors back online? She asked. Tuvok and Kim both nodded. Kim glanced down and said, the computer doesn't recognize any of these star formations. Captain, Tuvok added, narrowing his eyes, we are 6 light years from the nearest M-class planet. I am detecting nearly 33,000 humanoid life signs. I see the readings, said Kim. It looks like they're in a pre-industrial stage of development. But hold on. Harry? Paris prompted. The other sensors are coming back online and Kim's voice faltered. He looked up, worry etched across his face. According to the readings, we may not be in the Delta Quadrant anymore. Chakotay frowned. Where are we then? I I don't know, said Kim. The database shows no matching star maps for this region. Captain, said Tuvok calmly. Janeway turned to him as Chakotay hurried up the steps to Kim's station, double-checking the sensor data. Sensors no longer detect the anomaly or the radiation. I've got navigational sensors back, said Paris, eyes widening at his console. But this can't be right. Janeway rushed to his side. Paris pointed to the coordinates on his screen, Voyager's last known position, and then to the current ones. The numbers made no sense. Run a diagnostic, Janeway whispered. A beep signaled completion, but the coordinates still displayed as all zeros. That's not possible, she muttered. I don't understand it, said Paris. Maybe the radiation inside the tunnel interfered with our sensors? To only the navigational sensors? Janeway asked, raising an eyebrow. Maybe not, Paris admitted, frowning. The display showed error in place of their speed readings. Without knowing their speed, they couldn't calculate how far they traveled. He looked up at Janeway, realizing the truth. Voyager was lost once again, this time in an unknown region of the Milky Way. To be continued.